Hi and welcome to the How to Play video for Brave the Elements. My name is Miles Ratcliffe, the game designer and co-founder of Chaos Publishing. I'll be here to take you through the rules and explain the game step by step. To begin a game of Brave the Elements, each player chooses a colour and takes their corresponding colour followers. Players then take the 4 starting locations associated with their chosen colour, placing them face up in front of them. Location cards have a defense value and are worth a number of victory points for other players when taken. The aim of the game is to get the most victory points. Locations also have their own special ability. For example, this aqueduct has an ability to place a water token on this location. The timing of this ability is shown in the bottom left corner of the card. In this instance, this ability is applied at the end of every draw phase and as soon as it is constructed or placed face up in front of you. Locations cannot have more than one element token on it, although if you were to place another element token on the location, you may replace the one that was already on it. Element tokens come in 4 varieties: fire, air, earth and water. These are used to help prevent against incoming disasters. After handing out the starting locations, shuffle the remaining location cards and place them face down in the centre of the playing area. Place the top 3 cards from the location deck beside it, face up. These locations are in development. Next, shuffle the disaster cards and place them in the centre of the playing area, within reach of all players. Place the round tracker to the side, putting the time token on round 1. Provide each player with their own reference card. Place all the tokens, markers and dice in the centre of the playing area. Randomly determine the starting player and give them the start player card. You are now ready to begin your first round of the game. Brave the Elements is played over a number of rounds, depending on the number of players. Each round consists of 6 phases. Players take it in turns in clockwise order to complete these phases, beginning with the start player. The first phase is the draw phase, where players take it in turns to draw disaster cards until they have 6 cards in their hand. If you need to draw any cards, and there are no cards left in the disaster deck, shuffle the disaster discard pile and place it face down as the new disaster deck. Continue drawing from there. The second phase is constructing locations. In turn order, players choose one of the 3 locations in development and replace it with the top card of the location deck. After choosing a location, the player places the location in their playing area. Some locations have abilities which are applied immediately. This is indicated by an exclamation mark in the bottom left corner of the card. This academy, for instance, allows the player to draw a disaster card as soon as it is constructed. Players may only construct a new location during this phase if they control less than 5 locations. Otherwise, they must pass. Players continue taking turns until each player controls 5 or more locations. Except for monoliths, players cannot construct a location that shares the same name as another location they already control. When you construct a location with a question mark, mark it with an element marker of your choice. The disaster cards in Brave the Elements are multi-purpose. The third phase is the action phase. Most disaster cards have an action ability, as denoted by an arrow in the bottom right hand corner of the card. In turn order, players may take an action by using a card in their hand. They apply any of its effects, as shown on the card, and then discard it. Some actions allow players to take extra actions. These are taken immediately. The fourth phase is the infiltration phase. In turn order, players choose a location another player controls and infiltrates it. To infiltrate a location, roll the energy die. Then add any bonuses provided by locations, as well as any rune stones on locations you control. Some actions allow you to place a runestone on a location you control. Runestones add +1 when you infiltrate, as well as add +1 to the defense value of the location it's on. You cannot have more than 1 runestone on any location. In this example, the player rolled a 4 and adds +1 from their monolith and +1 from their runestone. This makes a total of 6. They then compare their total with the defense value of the location. As long as their total is equal to or higher than the defense value of the location, they have successfully taken that location. This is worth 2 victory points to them at the end of the game and is placed face down in their area. On the other hand, If your total is less than the defense value of the location, you place one of your followers on it. If you later take a location with one of your followers on it, you gain 1 victory point for each of your followers that are on it. They also add +1 to your infiltration rolls against the locations they are on, as well as add +1 to the strength value of disasters you conjure against that location. If a location with your followers on it is either taken or replaced, you return your followers to your supply, safe and sound. Except for Great Walls, you cannot infiltrate a location that has another player's follower on it. Once all players have infiltrated a location, we move on to Phase 5, Conjuring Disasters. There are 5 types of disasters: fire, air, earth, water, and wild. During this phase, players take turns to conjure a disaster card from their hand. To conjure a disaster, first choose a location another player controls to conjure the disaster against. Then place a disaster card from your hand face up onto the playing area, comparing the strength value of the disaster to the defense value of the location. Some disasters require you to roll the energy die to determine the strength value of the disaster. Add to the strength value of the disaster by adding any bonuses provided by locations you control, as well as adding +1 for each follower you have in the location you are conjuring the disaster against. To successfully conjure a disaster against a location, the total strength of the disaster must equal or exceed the defense value of the location. Disaster cards also have a support bonus in the bottom left corner of the card. You can add to the strength value of disasters by using other cards from your hand to add its support bonus to the disaster you are conjuring. To add a support bonus to a card, it must be the same element as the disaster. You may only support a disaster you are conjuring with other disaster cards of the same element, or wild disasters. You can support a disaster with any number of disaster cards. Once you have finished adding to the strength value of a disaster, check that it has been successfully conjured by comparing the strength value to the defense value of the location. Remember, the total strength of the disaster must equal or exceed the defense value of the location to be successfully conjured. Most disaster cards have a support bonus of +2. There are some, however, that add a dice roll. Apply this as you play the card. If the disaster has been successfully conjured, the player who controls the location must now defend against it. If the total strength value of the disaster does not equal or exceed the defense value of the location, and you choose not to add any further support cards, all cards are discarded and play continues clockwise. To defend against the disaster, first roll a number of defense dice as shown on the conjured disaster. Defense dice have one of each of the 4 elements: fire, air, earth and water, as well as a wild of any element, as well as a draw a card, which you draw a disaster card if you roll. Each disaster card shows how many and of which elements are needed to prevent it. After rolling, draw a disaster card for each draw a card result you roll, then match any elements rolled with those needed to prevent the disaster. Also, after you roll, you can use the defense ability of a card in your hand. This is represented by a shield icon. These prevent a disaster entirely. You can then use cards in your hand and element tokens from locations you control to match the remaining elements needed to prevent the disaster. To prevent the disaster, you need to match all the elements shown on the card. If you cannot or choose not to prevent the disaster's conjurer takes the location and places it face down in front of them. That player removes all tokens, markers and followers from the location, gaining 1 victory point for each of their followers that were removed. Wild disasters are their own type and can be supported by any of the 4 elements, although of only one type at a time. Wild disasters can be supported by other wild disasters, as well as the one element of another type. There is also a reaction card ability denoted by the star symbol. This particular card can be used to save a location from being lost through infiltration. Whether the disaster was prevented or not, all cards and tokens used to either conjure or defend against the disaster are discarded. Players take turns twice around so that all players have had the chance to conjure 2 disasters during this phase. Players are not required to play a disaster and can choose to pass instead. The 6th and final phase of the round is the Gain Victory Points phase. Players gain victory points in tokens based on the number of locations they control. If they have 3 or less locations, they don't gain any victory points. If they control 4 locations, they gain 1 victory point. If they control 5 locations, they gain 3 victory points. If you control a treasury, you will gain 1 extra victory point during this phase. Once you have completed each of the 6 phases, the round ends. If it is not the final round, move the time marker onto the next round and pass the start player card clockwise to the next player. There are 4 rounds to a 4-player game and 6 rounds to 3 and 2-player games. If this is the final round, players total their victory points from all locations they have taken and victory point tokens they have gained during the game. The player with the highest total is the winner.